My name is Celia Dawson. I'm 35 years old, currently living alone in Minneapolis and working as an auditor for a major financial firm. 3 weeks after my stepfather's funeral, I got a call from my mother, asking me to come home for something important. I assumed it would be a memorial or at the very least, a moment to share memories of him. But the moment I stepped into the living room, what greeted me was a cold piece of paper and 3 silent faces. My mother, my younger brother Jason, and a lawyer I had never seen before. You just need to sign here to waive your inheritance. I've decided everything will go to Jason. I stood there speechless. No one asked if I was okay. No one seemed to notice that I had just been stabbed in the back by my own family. Have you ever been pushed out of your family like you never existed? If you've ever felt like the extra piece in your own home, leave a comment below. Hit like and subscribe to this channel because what I'm about to share next might make you see family in a very different light. I remember the morning my father died like it happened yesterday. I was only 5, coloring a sun with crayons on a placemat at the kitchen table. He was a construction worker who worked night shifts, but that morning he had come home early, scooped me up and said, "Daddy's girl, if it doesn't rain, I'll take you to the park today." But he never came back. A scaffolding accident took his life instantly. My mother broke down for the first few weeks, holding me and crying nonstop. I was too young to understand anything except the heavy silence that filled our house. My dad's jackets were still hanging in the closet. His dusty boots still sat by the back door. Then, a few months later, something in her changed. Her chestnut curls, usually tied up, were now loose and dyed light blonde. The fridge was always stocked with frozen dinners and white wine. She started attending a local grief support group for widowed women. That's where she met Dean. He wasn't like the other men I'd seen. He was soft-spoken but kind, always asking if I liked apple pie or letting me pick the cartoon channel during dinner. Not long after they got married. I was 6. My mom told me to call him Uncle Dean, but it was Dean who gently placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "Call me Dad if you want to." I nodded. Not because I was told to, but because of the way he looked at me. It was the same look my real father used to give me. Dean never raised his voice. Every weekend he took me to the grocery store and let me pick my favorite cereal. He read the paper in the living room but always looked up to smile when I ran by. Those little things meant the world to a child like me. One evening I was on the floor playing with wooden blocks when my mom came out of the bathroom, glowing. "Celia, you're going to be a big sister." I didn't know whether to be happy or scared, so I just looked up at her holding her belly. She sat beside me, pulled me into her arms and whispered, "There will be so much more laughter in our home now." Jason was born on a spring morning. And from that moment on, nothing was ever the same. At first I was excited. I drew pictures of dolls and taped them on his nursery door. I cleaned bottles for my mom, folded little towels. But gradually, every glance, every word, every gesture of affection in that house turned toward Jason. Dean tried to keep things balanced, but even he got pulled into the Jason orbit. My mom became someone else. She wasn't the woman who used to wrap my scarf tight on cold mornings. She was someone who revolved around Jason like the sun around one planet. By the time Jason turned 3, my mom quit her job as an elementary school teacher to care for him full-time. "Early development is critical," she'd say. I wanted to ask, what about my early years? But I kept quiet. I started making my own cereal in the morning, packing my own backpack, folding my own clothes. When I told her she forgot to pack my lunch, she just brushed it off, saying, "I had my hands full with Jason today." Jason's birthday gifts were always wrapped in glossy paper, topped with balloons and musical cards. I got clearance rack shirts, some with the red sale tag still stuck on crooked. That Christmas when I turned 10, I tucked away my plastic doll with the missing arm in the closet. Not because I didn't like her, but because I didn't want Jason to see it. She cost just $3. Meanwhile, he had just unwrapped a remote-controlled car worth nearly $100. My mom sat beside him, beaming. I just smiled faintly. So I kept trying. I set the dinner table every night, changed Jason's diapers when Mom went out, even did some of his art assignments so she could proudly show his teacher. I believed that if I just tried a little harder, one day Mom would notice, would acknowledge me, would wrap her arms around me and say, "Celia, I know you need love too." That day never came. Dean noticed I was sad. One evening he sat beside me in the living room while I was doing homework. "You know," he said gently, "sometimes adults don't mean to hurt you." They just get so wrapped up in fear and expectations that they forget what you need. I didn't say anything, but I reached out and touched the back of his hand. It was the first time I'd done that on my own. As Jason got older, he got more reckless. He left toys everywhere, spilled milk on the rug, broke chair arms, and I was the one who cleaned up after him. "Celia, be a sweetheart and wipe this up. Jason's just a kid," Mom would say. I was 12. I'd heard that sentence so often it became a chant in my head. Dean pushed back a few times. "Sarah, you're turning Celia into a maid." But my mother just shook her head. "You don't understand. He's sensitive. I'm his mother. I know what he needs." I stayed quiet, like I always did. I didn't want to make her angry. Every time I got an A, she'd say, "That's fine." When Jason turned in a half-finished painting, she'd post it online with the caption, "My little genius's first masterpiece." I learned to pat myself on the back because no one else would. But no matter how forgotten I felt, I never imagined there would come a day when my mother would look me in the eyes and say, "You don't need anything. You don't deserve it." I still don't know what I did wrong. Or maybe I was wrong the moment I wasn't Jason. I turned 18 on a crisp September morning, when the maple leaves began to change on the road leading to our house. My birthday party was simple, just a store-bought cake, a few candles stuck on top, and a short greeting from my mom. "Happy birthday, Celia. You're grown now." Jason never came out of his room. Dean, ever the gentle soul, gave me the biggest slice and winked, "Today you're the princess of this house." I smiled, but inside I waited for something more, something that never came. That night, when everyone had gone to bed, I sat with my mom in the kitchen. She was sorting bills, her glasses slipping down her nose. I took a deep breath. "Mom, I want to talk about college." She didn't look up. "Go ahead." I submitted my application to Minnesota State's accounting program. "I've passed the initial screening, they just need my financial forms." Her hand paused midair. Then she set the papers down, removed her glasses, and looked at me. "Celia, I thought you'd choose something more gentle. Accounting is very demanding." "I love numbers. And it's a stable career." "I've done my research," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "But I need your help with the tuition." She stayed silent. For a few seconds I thought maybe she'd smile, maybe stand up and hug me like in those movies I used to believe in. Instead, she stood, poured herself a glass of water, and said in a tone as casual as the weather, "That won't be possible. The savings. I already used it." I blinked. "Used it for what?" "For Jason. He's going to attend the Art Institute in Chicago. The tuition is high, but he has real talent." I couldn't let that chance pass. My whole body froze. "You used the entire savings on him? I didn't think you'd react this way." She crossed her arms, her face now cold. "You can apply for scholarships, get a job. You're practical. Jason, he needs a chance to shine." I don't remember how I walked out of that kitchen. I just remember the bedroom door slamming shut behind me and collapsing onto the bed, my fingers clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my skin. I didn't cry. I just felt empty. The next morning, Dean called me out to the backyard. He was sitting in an old wooden chair, eyes barely concealing his frustration. "I had no idea your college fund was taken," he said. "I planned to split it between you both." "You don't need to explain," I said, forcing a crooked smile. He held my hand. "If I could make it right, I would. But everything's under your mom's name now. I have no say." I nodded. "I understand. I'll take care of it." And I did. I started college juggling 2 jobs. Mornings at the library and evenings waiting tables at a cafe near campus. On weekends, I took on extra data entry work for a small local accounting firm. For the next 6 years, I didn't take a single summer off. I earned my bachelor's, followed by a professional auditing certification. Whenever I felt exhausted, I thought back to that birthday night, to my mother's flat voice saying, "Jason needs to shine." Jason never knew any of this. He continued living in the colorful world my mother wrapped around him. His first painting at art school was of a 3-legged dog, displayed in the dorm hallway as a statement on imperfection. My mom drove 8 hours to see it, sobbed in front of the canvas, and posted on Facebook, "My misunderstood genius of a son." As for me, when I received a full-ride merit scholarship for my final year, my mother replied with a 2-word text, "Congrats." I didn't blame Jason. I wasn't sure he even understood what was going on around him. But I started to see my mother differently, not as a tired, overwhelmed woman, but as someone who knew exactly what she was doing. She chose to place Jason on a pedestal. She chose to let me walk alone. She chose to pretend it was all circumstance when in truth she had arranged it all. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, stayed strong, stayed quiet, she would one day see me. But the older I got, the more I realized, some people aren't blind. They just close their eyes because they don't want to see. And my mother was one of them. I landed my first job at a major auditing firm in downtown Minneapolis on a crisp April afternoon, just as tulips started poking through the cold sidewalks. The interview lasted less than 30 minutes, but the HR manager looked me in the eye and said, "You've got grit. We need people like that." I walked out of that glass tower with a smile I hadn't worn in years. 6 years of grinding, tuition bills, night shifts, and finals had finally led to something concrete. My own office. A steady income. And above all, a future I had drawn with my own hands. 2 years later, at 30, I put a down payment on my first apartment. It wasn't big, but it was clean, bright, and quiet enough to hear the drip of my coffee maker each morning. Granite countertops, tall windows overlooking red maples, and a balcony just right for a wicker chair and a pot of lavender. I wanted to share that joy. Even with everything in the past, I called my mom. "This weekend I'll cook dinner. You and Jason should come by," I said softly. "I'd love for you to see my new place." She paused, then replied, "Okay, if Jason's not too busy." I spent 2 full days preparing. I made Dad Dean's favorite roast simmered vegetable soup from my high school recipe book, and picked up 2 bottles of imported white wine, the kind Mom used to say, "smells like ripe pears." That evening, when the doorbell rang, I opened it with the simplest kind of hope. Jason walked in first, headphones on, eyes glancing past me like I was a stranger. Mom followed, wearing a worn-out coat, her steps slightly slower. I offered them seats, poured the wine, served the food. Jason set his phone on the table, played a video without trying to hide it. Mom glanced around the living room and gave her first comment of the night. "Small place. Feels a bit cold." I paused, then forced a smile. "I think it's cozy enough." "I'm not complaining," she said, swirling her wine. "Just missing a little something. Warmth, maybe." Jason smirked. "With your salary, you could have bought something bigger, right?" I set my chopsticks down, kept my voice steady. "You're job hunting, right?" "My firm's hiring financial assistants. If you need." Jason waved it off. "Office jobs aren't my thing. The market's brutal now. People like me need creative space." Mom nodded in agreement. "Jason's artistic. Regular jobs just don't unlock his full potential." I said nothing. I just quietly refilled Mom's glass. The rest of dinner was a blur of half-hearted compliments, awkward silence, and Jason glued to his phone screen. After dinner, while I was cleaning up, Mom approached from behind, her voice low. "Celia, I'm having some trouble with utilities. Can you help?" I turned. "How much?" "Around $1,000 a month." "I hate asking, but..." She hesitated, then said something that punched me in the gut. "You're doing comfortably. Jason's still figuring things out. Just help us through this stretch." I knew what she meant. It wasn't Mom needs help. It was, Jason needs to keep living this way. But I nodded. I didn't want to argue. I owed Dad Dean a promise, not to abandon this family. Starting the next month, I wired $1,000 to Mom's account every 5th of the month. Every time I saw that number leave my bank account, I whispered to myself, "It's temporary. Things will change." But as the months passed, the signs grew clearer. Maybe things were never meant to change. Jason still didn't work. Mom still guarded him like a fortress. And I, despite the job, the apartment, the independence, still felt like I didn't belong. Not in Mom's eyes. Not in Jason's mind. Not in the family tied to me by blood. I once believed that being grown meant being welcomed. But it turned out, to them, my success was an irritation. And the only role they saw for me was the one who paid to keep everything else in place. At the end of March, I drove home after 3 months of work. Mom had called, complaining about fatigue, headaches, and insomnia. "Maybe it's just age," she had said, then gently added, "Come eat with me, will you?" I didn't ask more. I agreed and told her when I'd arrive. Pulling into the driveway, I spotted a shiny new red sedan out front. Brand new plates, bright finish. I frowned, confused, when the door swung open. Jason stepped out first, hands in his pockets, hair a mess, eyes half awake. Behind him was a young woman, slim and flashy, tight silver pants, a purple faux fur coat, neon-painted nails. She chewed gum, tapped her long nails on her phone, then squinted at me. "Oh, you must be Celia? The family's top sponsor, huh?" I froze. Jason chuckled. "Ignore Tiffany. She jokes like that." Tiffany strutted closer, wrapped her arm around Jason and tilted her head confidently. "I've heard so much about you from his mom. Big shot accountant at some fancy company, right? Impressive. Jason's lucky to have a sister like you." I forced a polite nod. "Where's Mom?" "In the kitchen, probably cooking something." "Come in," Tiffany said, winking as she disappeared behind Jason like she already owned the place. The kitchen reeked of burnt meat and old grease. Mom had her back turned, but as soon as she heard me, she spun around. "Celia, you made it. I thought you'd be too busy." She hugged me like it was routine. But it felt empty. Like a chore. I leaned in and asked, "Mom, whose red car is that outside?" She wiped her hands on her apron, her tone unusually cheerful. "Oh, Jason bought it. His old car kept breaking down and I thought he needed something reliable for job interviews." I was stunned. "With what money?" Mom blinked and avoided my eyes. "Well, he borrowed a little from the money you send each month." I agreed too because, well, I thought he deserved something decent for once. I said nothing. My hand clenched the strap of my purse. After dinner, Tiffany made herself comfortable, propping her legs up on the coffee table, blasting her favorite reality show while reapplying lipstick using her phone as a mirror. I sat next to Mom, my voice cold. "I think it's time to stop the monthly support." Mom turned to me, her eyes immediately watery. "Celia, don't say that. You don't understand how hard it's been for me." "I do," I said slowly. "But you're letting him use my money to drive his girlfriend to the spa." Mom placed her hand on her chest, voice trembling. "If you stop, I don't know how I'll survive. I haven't told you this, but I've been having heart problems. I wake up in the middle of the night gasping for air. I don't want to burden anyone. That's why I let Jason handle things on his own." I looked at her. The anger was gone. Just fatigue remained. "Have you seen a doctor?" "Doctor visits cost money. Insurance isn't what it used to be." The same vicious cycle. I felt myself getting dragged back into that familiar hole, where guilt and responsibility wove themselves into an invisible noose. I sighed. "I'll keep helping. But you have to promise. Jason won't be allowed to blow that money on nonsense anymore." She nodded, lips whispering something about being grateful. But in her eyes I saw something different. Just for a second, a flicker of triumph that vanished so quickly I thought I might have imagined it. When I left, Tiffany walked me to my car, leaning casually against the door. "Don't worry, I take good care of Jason. And your mom? He's just the sweetest. This house has such a warm vibe." I didn't respond. I just opened the door, got in and shut it behind me. In the rearview mirror, Tiffany was still smiling. A smile without a trace of shame or gratitude. I wasn't even sure who I was helping anymore. Or what exactly I was feeding. Something that felt like it was slowly eating away at everything I once tried to protect. I saw Mr. Larry again one weekend afternoon when I stopped by the old house to drop off some supplements Mom had asked for. He was trimming his lawn across the street. Still thin but sturdy, white hair tucked beneath a faded baseball cap. As I stepped out of the car, he looked up, squinting into the sun, and gave me a small nod. "Celia," he said, voice raspy but kind. "Been a while since you came around." I nodded, trying to smile, but couldn't hide how drained I felt. "Yeah. I've been busy." He set the shears down and pulled a worn yellow envelope from his jacket pocket. Handing it to me, he looked straight into my eyes and said slowly, "This should have gotten to you long ago. It's Dean's will." He gave it to me before he passed. I froze, taking the envelope with trembling hands. How do you have this?" "Dean asked me to hold on to a copy. Just in case. I meant to give it to you at the funeral, but everything was so chaotic." I opened it as soon as I got back in the car, heart pounding like I was about to hear the final words of a man I'd never truly been allowed to call Dad. Dean's handwriting was shaky but clear. "I, Dean Harold Miller, leave the entirety of the joint estate, including the house at 17 Oak Ridge Drive and the savings account at First Star Bank, to be split equally between my two children, Celia Dawson and Jason Miller, with the hope that both may receive their fair share, just as I gave them both my love. I read it over and over, each word carving itself into my memory. That house, where I grew up, where I once knelt by the stairs crying after being scolded by Mom, where Dean once taught me how to tie my shoes, was supposed to be half mine. But I had never even been mentioned. Never asked. Clutching the will, I stepped into the house with frozen fingers. Mom sat on the couch reading a magazine through her glasses. Jason sprawled across the carpet, video game controller in hand, the sound of gunfire blaring from the big screen TV. I stood at the entrance to the living room and spoke just loud enough for both to hear. Mom, I just received Dad Dean's original will. She looked up, paused, then took off her glasses. Her face shifted for a moment, but her expression quickly hardened again. And it states very clearly, the house and the savings account were meant to be split between Jason and me. She crossed her arms and leaned back in her chair. Dean's gone, Celia. That will isn't valid anymore. I'm the sole surviving name on everything. I have the right to make changes. I gripped the paper tightly. So you changed it. Erased me. Gave everything to Jason? Why? After everything I've shouldered for this family? Mom stood, walked toward me, and her eyes no longer avoided mine. Because Jason is the one who needs love. He's fragile. He needs a foundation. And you, her voice dropped sharper. You were never the child I wanted. Even when I had you, I knew I'd never love you the way I loved Jason. I stood there, speechless. The room fell silent. Jason stopped playing and looked up but said nothing. I looked into Mom's eyes and saw no hesitation. No shame. That sentence wasn't a slip. It was a truth buried for 35 years. In my mind flashed all the quiet dinners, the cheap birthday cards, the silent bank transfers each month. All of it erased by 4 words. Never wanted you born. I folded the will and slid it into my purse. No one stopped me as I walked to the door. Just the old wood floor creaked beneath my shoes, and behind me Mom's voice called out, cold as stone. Don't come back, Celia. This is no longer your home. I didn't answer. I just opened the door and stepped into the dimming afternoon light, leaving behind a house full of things I once called family, but maybe never truly were. I drove back to the city as night settled in. Every window I passed blurred into streaks of dim light. Inside, everything spun like I'd just escaped something suffocating. Mom's words echoed like a blade slicing through my thoughts on loop. I couldn't even remember how many miles I drove, only that my hands were freezing and my cheeks stung with dried tears I hadn't wiped away. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat on the sofa with Dean's will laid out in front of me and my old financial notebook by my side. When Dean passed, no one told me anything about asset distribution. Mom only said, the lawyer's handling it, and Jason had cried for a bit. Then 3 weeks later had a new car, the latest gaming console, and a ski trip to Colorado with friends. I never knew where the money came from. The next morning I called an estate law office in St. Paul. A calm, patient assistant named Marlene answered. I explained briefly, sent a photo of Dean's handwritten will, the house address, the old savings account info, and whatever else I could remember. 3 days later I sat down with the attorney in person. His name was Robert Hale, probably in his 50s, thin frame, round glasses, and a firm voice like he was giving a lecture. He skimmed the documents, then looked up at me, his expression unreadable. Celia, if this will is authentic, you have a legal right to claim half the estate that was misallocated. I gripped my water glass. But my father is gone. My mom already moved everything into her name. Yes, but we still need to determine whether those changes were valid. He flipped a few pages. Do you know if the house was originally listed as joint property? Yes. And I believe Dean wrote that in the will as well. But my mom said she had full control since he passed. Hale shook his head. Death doesn't automatically nullify a legal heir's rights if a valid will exists. If she altered things without notifying the beneficiaries, or without witnesses, that revision could be easily voided. It felt like I had found a crack of light in a dark cellar. I want to investigate every asset Dean left behind. And if anything was handled improperly, I want to reclaim what's rightfully mine. Then we'll begin with the real estate transaction records. 1 week later, I received the first batch of documents from the law office. Within less than 6 months after Dean passed away, my mother had sold 2 plots of land in the northern part of Bloomington. Both were jointly owned by her and Dean. The proceeds from the sale were transferred into her personal account, then broken into smaller amounts and moved to Jason's account under the label Personal Asset Gifts. It didn't stop there. Dean's savings account, where he had once deposited over $120,000 for his private retirement fund, was nearly emptied within 8 weeks of his death. Each withdrawal was kept just under the mandatory reporting threshold, as if someone was deliberately trying to avoid leaving a clear trail. I sat silently in my apartment, the file open on the table, unable to decide whether to feel more angry or heartbroken. It wasn't about the money. It was about the way my mother acted, without hesitation, without informing anyone, without a trace of shame. Jason used those transfers to splurge on Tiffany, a new car, luxury watches, even a Vegas trip I saw flaunted on her Instagram with the caption, "Royal life with the love of my life." Attorney Hale called me that weekend. "Celia, I reviewed the amended will your mother submitted to the court. There's a problem." I leaned in toward my laptop screen. "What kind of problem?" "The amended will doesn't have 2 witness signatures. Under Minnesota law, any modification to a will without the required witness signatures is invalid. Also, the date she wrote on it is 2 weeks after Dean died. That's completely illegal." I gripped the phone tighter. What I felt wasn't rage anymore. It was clarity. Like I had finally stepped through a fog that had lasted over a decade, and could now see every crack in the wall I used to call home. "So what can I do, sir?" "We'll send a formal notice to your mother requesting mediation. If that fails, I'll file in civil court to reinstate the original will and seek restitution for the misappropriated assets." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "I'm ready." I had forgiven too many times, sacrificed too many years. Now I didn't need to stay quiet anymore. I didn't need to bankroll family harmony. I just wanted a basic sense of fairness, not just for me but for the man who quietly waited for me after school every afternoon and never asked for anything but a hug. Dean left me his love in small, thoughtful ways. My mother took it away with silence, disguised as sacrifice. I sat across from Attorney Hale in his office, the soft light from the floor lamp casting a calm over the room. His voice was steady and low as he said, "Celia, the civil complaint is complete. I'll submit it to the county court tomorrow morning. Are you sure you want to proceed?" I didn't hesitate. "I've lived my whole life in silence, Mr. Hale. All I want now is the truth to come out." The lawsuit requested the reinstatement of Dean's original will, a declaration that the amended version was invalid, and full restitution of the wrongfully taken assets, including the house and savings account. It wasn't just about property. It was proof that I was never a footnote in this family. News of the lawsuit reached my mother and Jason 3 days later. I didn't hear from them right away, but the following Monday morning, Tiffany was the first to call. The phone buzzed during a meeting, and the moment I saw her name on the screen, I knew nothing good was waiting on the other end. "I'm just asking you to drop the lawsuit," she said, her voice rushed and hesitant. "Jason is falling apart. Your mom's been crying nonstop. We can't handle the legal pressure." I let out a breath. "And when I was the one quietly sending money to support all 3 of you, did anyone wonder if I could handle it? I know we were wrong. But please don't put Jason through a court case. He's too fragile." I hung up. Not out of anger. I just didn't want to hear one more plea dressed up as Jason's mental health, a tune I'd heard all my life. 2 days later, my mother came to my office. No warning. No appointment. The receptionist called me out during a client review. She stood there, dark knit coat, pale face, and eyes that looked like she'd been crying. I froze for a moment, not out of emotion but because the scene was all too familiar. "Celia," she said, her voice trembling, "I know you're angry. But this doesn't need to go that far." I crossed my arms. "What's far to you, Mom? When you erased my name from the will, didn't that feel far enough?" She collapsed onto the lobby bench, her hand clutching her chest. "My heart hurts, Celia. I haven't eaten in days. I just keep thinking of when you were little, how I had to raise both of you all alone." I sat across from her, my voice steady and cold. "You raised Jason. As for me, you left me to fend for myself. And when I made it, you treated me like a bank." "I was wrong," she whispered, tears falling onto her wrist. But if we go to court, press, neighbors, relatives, I can't survive that. I'm begging you. I leaned back and pulled out my phone. I need an ambulance. An elderly woman is showing signs of chest pain at office number 304 in the Evergreen building. My mother's eyes widened with surprise. I stood, adjusted my coat. You say your heart hurts, I won't ignore that. But I also won't let you manipulate things with your tears anymore. She stayed quiet. I turned away, walked back down the hall, my footsteps echoing against the elevator chime. That was the first time I looked my mother in the eye without flinching. Without begging for love that was never coming. The lawsuit moved forward. I knew my mother would hire a lawyer. Jason would show up in court with tired eyes, saying things someone else wrote. Tiffany would sit in the back, sunglasses on, lip bitten in mock regret. But I'd be there. I would listen. I would stay composed, the way I'd learned to survive as a shadow in my own family. And I wouldn't bow anymore. Not for anyone. The courtroom at Hennepin County Courthouse was cold and empty that morning. I sat in the plaintiff's row behind Attorney Hale, who calmly reviewed the files in front of him. The room smelled of old wood and fresh paper, the scent I'd always linked to justice, or at least the hope for it. My mother entered from the side door, walking more slowly than usual. She wore a deep blue coat, her hair pinned up. Her expression tried to look composed, but I saw the dark circles under her eyes and the way her hands clutched each other. Jason followed behind, wearing a wrinkled white shirt, eyes blank. Tiffany was nowhere to be seen. Less than 10 minutes into the hearing, my mother's lawyer, a gray-haired woman named Margaret, requested a private meeting with our side. In a small conference room with brown carpet, she got straight to the point. My client wants to settle. Celia agrees to drop the case and avoid public trial. We're offering 30% of the home's value along with a financial payout to resolve this matter. I looked at Attorney Hale, then at my mother. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She stared at her untouched cup of tea. I opened my purse, pulled out a flash drive and a notarized witness statement. I set them on the table. I have a recording of my mother admitting she sold the 2 plots Dean left and transferred the money to Jason. I also have a signed statement from our neighbor, Mr. Larry, confirming Dean's clear wishes in the original will. Attorney Margaret stayed quiet for a moment, then gave a slow nod and gathered her papers. Then we'll return to the courtroom. In the courtroom presentation, Attorney Hale clearly stated, the original will was valid, had 2 witnesses and was properly stored, while the amended version lacked witness signatures, was not notarized and was dated after Dean's death. I was asked to take the stand to confirm the evidence. I spoke briefly, nothing more, nothing less. While I was giving my statement, Jason muttered something under his breath, but their attorney quickly stopped him. When the court began reviewing the audio recording, the atmosphere turned heavy. My mother's voice came through the speakers. Just sell the 2 plots and transfer the money to Jason. That daughter already has a job and a house, she doesn't need anything. But Jason, he needs support. The judge, a man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and a stern gaze, listened in silence until the end, then asked, Mrs. Sarah Miller, do you have anything to refute? My mother stood up, her voice faint and trembling. I only did what I thought was best for my children. I didn't expect things to turn out this way. The man on the bench showed no change in expression. He paused for a few seconds, then announced, after reviewing the evidence and cross-checking the testimonies, this court declares, the original will of Mr. Dean Harold Miller is legally valid. The amended version is null and void. The estate will be distributed according to the original will. However, due to the clear and long-standing financial harm caused to Ms. Celia Dawson by being unlawfully stripped of her inheritance, this court rules that Ms. Celia Dawson shall receive 60% of the total estate value. I heard a soft groan from Jason's direction. When I turned around, he had already sprung to his feet, yelling, "She always takes everything. My whole life I've been compared to her. Mom, you promised me." My mother stood frozen, arms limp at her sides, her face pale and expressionless. Jason tore off his tie and stormed out of the courtroom in a rage, his fists clenched. I stayed seated, my hands resting on my knees, feeling no triumph, only relief. In the hallway, I saw Tiffany leaning against the wall, phone in hand, whispering angrily to someone. When she spotted me, she slipped on her sunglasses and walked past without a word. 3 days later, I heard she had moved out of Jason's house to be with a real estate broker in Chicago. My mother never called after the trial. No letters. No texts. The last time I saw her was that day she sat silently on the left side of the courtroom, the late afternoon light spilling through the old window, catching the tangled strands of gray in her hair. She said nothing. And I understood. Maybe that was the most honest thing she had ever given me. I sold the old house at the end of fall. The maple trees out front had begun to turn gold, and the wind slipping through the cracks made the already cold house feel even more hollow. Each room held layers of memory, not because they were beautiful but because they had once hurt me. I packed everything quietly, keeping only 2 photos. One of Dad Dean under the porch holding a paint bucket and smiling in the sunlight. The other of me at 13 wearing a baseball cap, standing next to him at an end-of-year school award ceremony. Attorney Hale helped me finalize the sale in just under 3 weeks. I received the compensation amount as ruled by the court, along with proceeds from the remaining assets. It wasn't a massive fortune, but it was enough that I no longer had to budget every paycheck just to stay afloat. I bought a small lakefront home on Lake Minnetonka. Sloped roof, white paint, an old but sturdy wooden porch. The living room caught the morning sun, and in the back, a short path led to a wooden dock where I could hear the soft lapping of water during misty mornings. No one knew I lived there except my lawyer and the bank. My phone stopped ringing with unfamiliar numbers. I had blocked all contact from my mother and Jason. Emails from them went straight to spam. Every time I opened my inbox, there were no more long-winded accusations, no more manipulative guilt trips, no more half-hearted pleas attached to demands. I moved into the new house on the first day snow dusted the grass. I laid out rugs, hung curtains, bought an oak reading table for quiet afternoons. These small acts made me feel like I was truly beginning something of my own. Not borrowed. Not assigned. Not what was left after someone else had taken first pick. One Saturday afternoon I sat down to write my will. Not because I was thinking about death but because I wanted everything to be clear, so that no one could ever take my intent away the way they had taken Dean's. In the personal notes section I wrote, I leave everything to the person who understands what real love means, not because of blood but because of choice. That person may be a friend, a child who was abandoned, or someone who held my hand during a moment I no longer believed in kindness. When I signed my name, my heart was still. I no longer carried the burden of wondering why my mother never chose to love me. I no longer had to pretend to be strong when facing Jason's cold stare. I didn't feel hatred. I just no longer felt the need to hold on. That late afternoon, I made myself a cup of ginger tea and sat by the large window, watching the lake begin to freeze into glistening silver. A pair of ducks glided across, leaving behind faint ripples like pencil strokes across a page. I leaned my head against the window frame, feeling warmth from inside reach all the way to my fingertips. I didn't need someone to say my name for me to feel I mattered. I didn't need anyone to validate my past to know it was enough. In the end, I was no longer the abandoned daughter, but a woman who knew exactly how she wanted to live, how she wanted to love, and what she chose to hold on to. I smiled softly, not because anyone was watching but because I had finally found myself in the quiet. A place no one could erase me from. What would you do if the person who gave you life was the first to strip away your worth? Have you ever had to fight to exist inside your own family, where love came with conditions and recognition never quite made it to you? I know each of us carries a different story. Maybe none are the same, but the pain of being overlooked, of carrying everything alone while surrounded by those who should care, that's something too many of us have known. If my story touched something in you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever forgiven after being unappreciated? Or let go to start healing on your own? I'd love to hear your story. And if you want to follow more emotional journeys about family, betrayal, love, and what it means to grow beyond the hurt, hit that subscribe button. Because life isn't just about what we're born into, it's also about what we choose to reclaim. See you in the next story, where together we face the truth and find our way out of the dark, one light at a time.